that's going to be $2.5 million to do that conversion. So a lot of things that a lot of people would think you wait for the vendor to do, you can do with us. Chart of account discussions, public records retention, specifically what you're going to keep with your accounting data, the state of what that data is in. What are you going to do with that system once you convert to the new one? Are you going to keep the old system around for just data warehousing, or have it just available so that if there is some data that needs to be pulled there? It's almost like a security blanket. We've talked about this in other situations. People always think they need to bring over a lot more data than they actually do, but a lot of clients are always like, okay, I get it. We're not going to move it. We're not going to convert it and put it in the new system, but I need to know it's there. And I need to know that if the state comes and says, I need to see the contract on this teacher from 27 years ago, I'm going to be able to produce that some way, somehow, either in the old system or because the data in the old system is being stored and maintained someplace so that I can get that. So there's a lot of aspects that we know of, especially with contract negotiations now. We know vendors are going to push back very hard about their liability, and they're going to want to write the contract so that there almost is no liability by the software vendor.
Right.
And again, that's a normal part of doing business with folks, but that's also the area that's been the biggest sticking point in our last couple of negotiations. Price was secondary. The fact that the software vendor and the implementer they were working with, the one they had selected, seemed to be going, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm just going to delineate your liability from mine, and I'm going to make sure I'm protected. And I think legal departments mean to do that at software vendors. I don't think sales, support, and implementation means that, but that's how it comes across to the client in negotiations. So understanding the perspective the client's going to start with, having those conversations with our client before we go into negotiations and let them know, are you solid on your liability? What do you think you can take to your board, and what can you not take to your board? And let's just lay out a baseline of where we're going to start on these contract negotiations and get a lot of that done. So even before we start planning out implementation, there's tons of things that we know the vendor's going to do and is going to want to do and is not going to want to do, that we can start that conversation with the client early and get those answers.
Yeah, let's talk about go live, right? This is something that we talk about all the time. You know, a lot of times our vendors like to set a go live date, and we encourage our clients to think from a holistic view and say, hey, what does go live mean to you and your organization? Does it mean that, you know, all the lights turn on and you know, you have a power on for your solution, or does it mean that, you know, you're running checks in the new system, you're onboarding in the new system? You know, what does go live mean to you, and not letting your vendor determine what that means for you. So can you talk a little bit about go live dates, Robert, and how that might affect your timeline?
Oh yeah, so there's always that balance between go live has to be pretty well nailed down, because again, in these larger organizations, there are periods of time where HR is not going to be available, especially if they're an entity that does hiring seasonally or at certain times of the year. They're going to need to be able to dedicate a lot of time for that 2, 3, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, even position control and building out the budgeting that you have to do to get approved, so then you can go out to the hiring season, your next hiring season, and hire. These are all day ranges that there's a compromise that has to be made. Either it's the client saying, no way you can have my staff for these 3 weeks. Or it's going to be the software vendor going, if we are going to be able to make it to UAT at this particular point, so the go live isn't threatened, I am going to need some of your staff time, but let me tell you what I'm going to need, and let's see if we can make that work out. So some cases that go live date is still a little soft, and it can be part of the planning process to figure out when exactly that's going to be. Other cases, we've walked into clients and they're like, no, end of the year, I have to be off the system. The support is done. It's run out. There's no one else that's going to do anything for it. And I can't live with an unsupported ERP system. I have to make a go live by 12/31 of the end of the year. Mm-hmm. So it's going to vary. And so, of course, the factors involved with that are going to vary to some degree as well. You're going to be able to stretch things out a little bit, look at the cost implication of doing that. But then also making sure the client doesn't feel like we're going to lose momentum, and that we feel like we're not going to lose momentum by turning a go live into 2 years down the road, which is that seems like an eternity when you're dealing with a system that right now is not doing what what you need it to do. So it's going to vary from client to client. And it's also going to be a cost factor is usually the biggest one. We can give
Oh
you
yeah.
lots of time to do the project, but it's going to cost you a lot more to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have all these pressures from your staff, from the fact that your existing system doesn't work, that's going to go into play on those. So those conversations can be very straightforward. They can also be couched in a lot of nuance that we have to walk people through until we get the answer that we need and that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And so that process, in some cases, on some projects, that's a continuing discussion on
Yeah.
go live is to what is actually going to be the definition of when you're ready to go,
Mm-hmm.
and at what point is that actually going to make sense for you to do.
Right, right. You touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about clients who we work with who their current systems have a sunset date, right? And so we're trying to do a lot of work again in a shorter time frame to combat that because maybe a client, wants to have a new system selected before their sunset date. Walk us through how we go about. Educating clients, helping clients define what the best approach is and how that may affect the overall timeline for implementation.
Yeah, a lot of it is vetting the realities of that situation.
Mhm.
Your system might no longer have support by the end of the year, and diving into, okay, what does that mean? Is there an option of support there, but you declined to do it because of the cost, or because you wanted to move to the new system as quickly as possible? Is this an absolutely drop dead date? There will be no customer support for your existing system past this particular date.
Mhm.
Even then, finding solutions. Are there other folks who are willing to support the system for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and just be able to keep it going for that period of time? Then that weighs into the decision of, okay, then let's go back to timeline. And is 9 months realistic to do an entire discovery, selection,
Right.
contract negotiation, and implementation? In most cases, no.
No.
Not always no, but in most cases, it's no. It can
Mhm.
be done, but you also have to look at the battleship that you're trying to steer. If this is a county government with 600, 700, 2,000, 3,000 employees, that's a heck of a lot of change management,
Oh
and
yeah.
you're just not able to steer the ship that quickly in those cases. Some clients, if it's a subcomponent of ERP or it's a module in ERP and you're just replacing that particular system, yes, you can do that on a shorter timeline. But then that also invites the discussion of, do you want best of breed or do you want integrated ultimately for your
Mhm.
ERP? Because just solving this little piece of it now could make it more difficult for what you want to do with ERP later on down the road. So these
That-
are all the little nuance and caveat situations that get involved in these decisions.
So, what would your advice be to that client who may have a sunset date approaching or in the near future? How do they go about planning for that, or what advice would you give to them?
Make sure that those dates are real, and run that down. Just don't take someone's word for it. Of the software vendor said they're no longer going to support our current system, as of Q1 2026. And does that mean that the software vendor is still willing to support you, but you have to move to their SaaS environment and do a conversion there? Does that mean the software company is not going to support that particular brand anymore whatsoever? And make sure you know the details of that, because you need to know what your options are. And the options can include, like what I also said, there are other companies, there are third parties that would be willing to support that platform on a month by month or quarter by quarter basis, if that's what you need to be able to plug the gap.
Hmm.
And especially, I would step back and ask yourself, is that the only thing that is driving my need to go live on this particular date?
Hmm.
And vet those and get your options on that. And you're probably gonna have to reach out to someone, likely us, to help figure out what those options are. But again, I love handing out free advice. If that's on your mind and you need some firmer decisions or you need some clarity on that, just talking to us for an hour, we can walk you through a number of scenarios that will help determine, is that a real drop dead date, or is that a date that, yes, there's implications, but there's ways to overcome that and change that date, and then take a little bit of pressure off of your budget and your staff to have to do this immediately in this fiscal year.
Yeah, yeah. The point is you have options, right? I think vendors a lot of times try to scare our clients into, hey, this is going away. You've got to do something now, right? But you do have options, and as Robert said, please reach out to us.